Hello students, welcome to online history class. Brought to you by myself, Most Def, and Talib Kweli. So let me tell you about your test on Wednesday. You're going to have two parts to the test. One is going to cover the Renaissance. It's going to be all multiple choice. 45 questions related to everything we've studied about the Renaissance. For instance, these questions were made from your videos, and you'll be quizzed on every artist. And then after that, you'll have a section that looks at different primary sources that we looked at, which could include things from your artist, images, pictures, and readings. Any primary source can be on there. So that'll be the multiple choice section, 45 minutes, and then you'll have the writing section, 45 minutes to complete your DBQ, which takes us back to last unit where you're talking about the Middle Ages, and that's what we're going to go over right now, how to do that. So you've got your AP Euro DBQ writing packet, and first thing you should have done is, and if you haven't done it yet, you need to do it. You need to use Hippo to break down the documents, document 1, document 2, document 3. So we did the first one together. The second one, I hope one of the main ideas you gathered from that was about the English Peasants' Revolt. And then the third idea here, I hope one of the things you gathered from that was a familiar reading, the Decameron, the Plague Hits Florence from Boccaccio, about the plague. So we've got three main ideas, and I'm going to start a chart for us to help us keep these ideas separate. And you need to do the same thing on a sheet of paper. So grab a sheet of paper and do this. So here's the beginning of my chart. I'm going to keep our three separate ideas, X, Y, and Z, and I'm going to try to place the documents here and then also outline it on how I'm going to relate it to the three subjects: political, religious, and economic. So let's say X is related to the big idea, Great Schism, and what document goes with that. Document 1, right, the Italian Nun. That helps me keep things straight. Second major idea, we got the English Peasants' Revolt. And the document that goes with that, document 2. And then over here we've got the Black Plague. And that was document 3. Document 3. And then what we want to do now is I want to go over the AP Euro DBQ XYZ thesis categories. So we did this already. We've divided into our three categories, but let's look at some examples. So after reading all the documents, usually that means all 7. So instead of just 3 documents fitting into our three categories, we'd want to have all 7 documents fitting into those categories. But since we're only using 3 documents, because it's a shortened DBQ, we put the 3 documents in already. And then it says, if the question gives you categories, use the ones you are given to group the documents. Here's an example. Analyze the attitudes towards the extension of suffrage in the United Kingdom between 1870 and 1960. Main idea is attitudes, but because it doesn't give you categories such as social, political, religious, you're just going to describe the 3 different attitudes. Attitude 1, attitude 2, attitude 3. Sometimes you don't get specific categories again, and for this question, analyze the causes. It's helpful to use Persia G to think about, alright, after reading the documents, what 3 categories stood out. And for this question, it'd be really easy to organize them around political, economic, and geographical. So that's going to be your X, political, your Y, economic, and your Z, geographical. So there's 2 examples to get you thinking about other questions and how you'd group them. So for our question, let's return to our question and our 3 categories. So going back up to the question, analyze the social, political, and religious effects of the major crises that occurred in France and England during the 14th century. So we need to figure out what's social, what's political, and what's religious. So I think it's easiest to just say, alright, I'm going to talk about the Great Schism, because I know that's related to religion. So I'm going to relate that to religion. The English Peasants' Revolt, well, that generally is about society. But you know what? It might be easier to relate that to politics. The reason people are revolting is because of the political system that exists, with the kings on top and the peasants at the bottom. And then the Black Plague. What are my categories again? Social, political, religious. So I need political, I need social. Can I relate the Black Plague to social effects? Absolutely right. I can talk about the changing reality for the peasants, and how because of the death of so many peasants, there's new opportunities in the economy. You can relate it that way to social. So we got our three categories, X, Y, and Z. So now let's return to our XYZ thesis and break it down. So the XYZ thesis takes those three categories and makes an arguable claim or statement about each. It does not merely list your groupings. So, negative example number 1, just listing. This is what we don't want to do. The 100 Years' War was caused by economic, political, and geographical reasons. That will not get you a point on the AP exam for sure. There's a simple fix. You describe each grouping, add adjectives. Add that to your notes. Add adjectives, and then specific details. Most often nouns about person, place, or things. So let's look here. Positive example that will get you a point on the AP exam for sure. The 100 Years' War between France and England was caused by adjective, intense political competition, noun. So our adjective and noun were added. Here, our Y, the struggle, adjective for economic superiority. Again, that's a noun, person, place, or thing. And then the fight over, that would be what we consider our adjective. Geographical claims to lands, our noun. So what you need to do is add your adjective and your nouns, and that's a simple fix. You can look at positive example number 2. It just makes a more complex argument, and that would score a point as well too. Work on our thesis. So I want you to, underneath your XYZ work here, your outline, write thesis, and let's go back to our question. Again, return to the question. Analyze the social, political, and religious effects of the major crises that occurred in France and England during the 14th century. So we got to keep those specifics in mind. It's France and England. It's the major crises, and what were their effects. Okay? So, keeping those things in mind, you're going to brainstorm your thesis and make sure you're describing the effects. So, for example, you can start out 3 major crises of the Middle Ages. The Great Schism, the English Peasants' Revolt, and the Black Plague. Problem. I've got a list here. Now, there's a simple fix, and it's called this. It's called a partition. And what that does, it makes a 2-sentence thesis, where you have listed, which we're avoiding because that doesn't get us a point, but then you go on to describe each one. So now I actually create my thesis, and I say the Great Schism, You got to add your adjectives and your nouns for X, Y, and Z, describing their major effects. So I'm going to let you do that on your own because I want to see what you come up with for your thesis. So do that now. And maybe it doesn't start out the Great Schism. Maybe it starts out a different way. But I'm going to let you develop the thesis. And you can use this If you would like, you do not have to. You can also just create your own thesis, and then I'll be giving you a grade, but I'll review it too. Alright, so create your thesis, and then we'll talk about the next part. The introduction paragraph, it needs to include these things in this order. The setting, describe the time and place, background, the historical content, what is going on at this time in Europe, and then you need your thesis and your partition. So I want you to, number one, look at these two examples. These are great introduction paragraph examples. And then I want you to, underneath your intro paragraph, include these things. So the setting and background, and this is the beginning of your outline. So setting, well, I'm talking about France and England. And then you have to tell me the date. So return to your notes here. Specifics are going to help you. The historical context you've come up with. So then you'd want to, for background, you'd want to then also explain some of the details, basic details. What is the Great Schism? What happened with the English Peasants' Revolt? It's not huge. It should be no more than 3 sentences. But it explains the basic ideas that you're going to be talking about. So the Great Schism, the English Peasants' Revolt, and the Black Plague. Not in detail yet. That's what the body paragraphs are for. And then after you've done that, then you add your thesis. And if your thesis has a partition, then you add the partition. So remember, do not just list. Alright? What your intro can look like, or I'm sorry, what your outline can look like is complete these two things and put bullet points here. So bullet point, bullet points, and then your thesis and your partition should be written up here. You can write out your whole thesis for this. So you don't need to write those out here. They're up here. Alright, so that brings us to the body paragraphs. Let's talk about this. Alright, for your body paragraphs, we're going to keep it simple. So this is the basic format. For paragraph 2, you'd have a topic sentence that relates to X, so your first idea in your thesis. You have to provide evidence / make a claim, and that needs to come from the document. So in this case, you're going to draw that from document 1, the Italian nun. And then you need to analyze, so relate your claim back to the topic sentence by doing one of the following. Describing how the intended audience would impact the author's point, look at their point of view and describe their point of view. Explain the historical context of the time and how that impacts the document. You need to make sure you do one of these. Doing 2 is even better, but doing 1 is sufficient. And then on a normal DBQ, because there's 7 documents you have to analyze, you'd repeat this process, E and A, for a second document, and then possibly for a third document, because each body paragraph is going to have between 2 to 3 documents. So it would be more like TEA, EA, and then C, clincher sentence. So your concluding analysis that draws connection between what you have claimed about the document and your topic sentence. So summarize what you said here in TEA. So what is this going to look like for paragraph 2, 3, and 4? Let me show you. Alright, so back to our outline. We've got our XYZ, our thesis, our intro paragraph, you've got outlined, and now this is the setup for paragraph 2, 3, and 4. So X, write in your category, what is it? And then T, E, A, and C. Okay, your topic sentence, your evidence, your analysis, and your clincher sentence. They're all going to go here. So that's the format for paragraphs 2, and then you need to repeat it for Y and Z for paragraphs 3. So I should see your notes on what you're doing for T, E, A, and C for paragraphs 2, 3, and 4. Which brings me to my final point. Turning to our body paragraphs, in order to get this point, you have to do one additional thing beyond the documents they give you. At some point in one of the 3 body paragraphs, you need to bring in an outside source and analyze how it connects to the point you are making in that paragraph. So I want you to do that by doing this. Describe an outside document or event. What is it? Which paragraph will you add it to? and then explain the connection. So you could pull in, for instance, the jockery or something like that. That is all. Thank you very much. Actually, one more thing. I want to make sure that you pay close attention to how you cite your documents in the DBQ. There's two very easy ways. Number one here is just writing the author in the print, wrote, and then you write the quote, and then you put in parentheses document 3. Okay? Here's another example. The 19th century historian Jacob Burckhardt felt that it is his quote from his document. Keep it short. Don't have long quotes. Keep it very short. Document 5. One thing you never do. Never begin with in document 8, because that doesn't tell us anything about the document. We need to know the author and the title of the document. So when you reference your documents, pay close attention to how you're doing it. And that's the evidence part. So you should be referencing the documents in each of the body paragraphs using this method here. Okay? Alright, do your best to complete the outline. This is the first DBQ, and it is a learning process, but be sure that you go through this process and complete everything that you need here, and then we will go over the conclusion paragraph on Monday. Have a great weekend. I'll see you soon.